What's up guys, I'm Kai, hope you're doing well, and in this video I'm going to show you how I built this rack, so stick around. You're watching Lucas Landon Royals. So guys, in one of my previous videos, I said I need a enclosure size for my sub-adult ball pythons, something that's gonna allow them to transition from their grow out tubs to their adult tubs. And this is what I came up with. If you wanna find more about this tub, go ahead and click on the link up here. In this video, we're gonna build a rack that holds 16 of these. That's this guy you see here. So let's start at the beginning and I'll go through the entire process and explain all the steps to get to this point. So for this build, we're going to base it off of this design. Now, obviously this is for 16 28 core tubs. We're going to be building a slightly smaller version for those gray tubs. And this has a open side design. So you can see the front and the sides are both open, and the front uprights are slightly narrower, I think about 4 inches, and the ones in the back are slightly wider. I think those are 7, but you can go wider if you like. First thing I want to do is measure out where these shelves are going to attach to these uprights. So I need to figure out the spacing and then measure out and mark where all these shelves are going to attach to these uprights. I'm going to use the floor as my work surface. So I have all those uprights laid out on the floor here in front of me. Now to measure everything out, I'm just using a ruler. I know the height of the tub is 5 inches. We have to have a 1/8 inch gap for airflow, so 5 1/8, and plus the thickness of the shelving material is 1/2 inch, so that puts us as 5 5/8. So we're going to use a ruler and measure out 5 5/8 from this corner to 5 5/8, and then from here 5 5/8, 5 5/8, 5 5/8, so on and so forth. Now I've already marked out this one panel right here. We're going to transfer these marks to the second piece. Now to transfer the marks, we simply put the two pieces up against each other, line them up, and then use a pencil to transfer over the marks. I know those pencil marks are a little bit hard for you guys to see on camera. To be quite honest, it's hard for me to see here as well. So to help us out, I'm going to put a little piece of blue painter's tape right on those marks, on all of these marks, and this is just going to help us visually see a little bit easier, making sure that I don't cover up those X's that we put on. So the X's are on this side, that's where these shelves are going to attach to. These marks just help as reference points. So I'm going to put all of these marks with a little bit of tape. Now once they're all taped up, we just come back with a sharp knife and just cut the tape right down the center. And that will release the two pieces. And we got tape on both sides. So now that we got the thicker pieces measured out, I just have to repeat that entire process with the thinner boards. And we can do that again by lining them up with the thicker board first. That way we don't need to use a ruler to remeasure everything. And again, I'm just going to put a mark, transfer the marks over. So now that we have all our pieces cut and marked out, we can start assembling some of them together. And I want to start with this corner right here. I'm going to take one of the thinner uprights and one of the thicker uprights and join them to the base panel. Before inserting a single screw, I want to show you this setup. For those of you who are working alone, invest in a set of these corner clamps. You can see that they act as a separate set of hands. They hold everything together and are nice and square. So the bottom piece is the one that I want to screw into these two uprights. So I have them held into place right now. You can see this is plywood and it's painted all around except for the bottom because that doesn't get seen. And over there is one of the interior shelves. Now that doesn't belong there. I just have it over there so that it keeps these two uprights horizontal. Now the total height of this over here, or the total width we should say, is 32 because we have this panel which is 1/2 inch thick, that panel which is 31 inches wide, and a panel at the bottom floor which is also 1/2 inch thick, making it total width of 32. That matches the width of this piece, which is 32 as well. Now we know that this is horizontal and these are 90-degree corners. So we are ready to drill or insert the screws in this way into the uprights. I'm going to put 2 there and 2 there. So let's get to it. And the screws that I'll be using are these number 6 1 1/4 flathead Phillips wood screws. Did you see how I screwed together the back end? I'm gonna do the same thing on the front side, so I give you a closer view as well as an explanation. The first thing I wanna do is drill a pilot hole with this drill bit, and you can see that the diameter is just slightly thinner than the screw itself. The next thing I want to do is use this thicker drill bit, and I'm just going to bury this drill bit into the wood material just a tiny bit. Because it's wood, these screw heads are going to have a hard time sinking into it. So I'm going to use this drill bit to take a little bit of material out, creating that negative space so that the drill head can sink down into it and be flush with the material. So now you can see what this looks like. We have the smaller hole that is right in the center that goes all the way through the plywood into the PVC. And then we have the slightly larger diameter hole that is just slightly beneath the surface of the wood. Now when I drive these screws in, you'll see that the screw head sits flush with the surface of the plywood. Now that these 3 pieces are attached, I can remove the corner clamps and use them to hold the center shelves while I attach them with more screws. At this point, we have the two uprights, a thin one and a thick one, attached to all the interior shelves as well as the bottom panel over there. I purposely left off the top panel. It'll be easier to attach that once we get this whole unit upright. For now, we have to spin this unit in this direction 180 degrees so that we can attach the other two uprights on the other side. A few of you with a keen eye might notice some discoloration on a few of these panels, but that's okay because when I assembled it, I made sure all the white edges faces the front. This is going to be the back and it's going to get covered up with corrugated plastic. Now let's move on to assembling the other two uprights. I have the thick one, that's going to be the back, and the thinner one, which is going to be the front. I have to attach them similar to what I just did earlier with corner clamps, pilot holes, and screws. I have the unit over here standing in its upright position. Now I want to spend some time on building out the base. The base starts off with 4 pieces of lumber screwed in at the corners, 2 screws at each corner. This is 2x3. You can use 2x4, but 2x3 is plenty. Right now it's just 4 pieces of lumber screwed in. What I like to do is get to a point where we have something like this. Now, this is very similar to what I just showed you. It's 2x3, basically a rectangular frame. I got 1 brace in the center. And if you look underneath right here, there's another trim piece. Now that trim piece is there to hold in this styrofoam. So I got a trim piece on the inside of this one, as well as the other side down here. And that's holding in this styrofoam so that when the rack sits on top of it, it'll basically squish the styrofoam down flat and provide some insulation to the very bottom level of the rack. We have gotten a lot accomplished so far. One thing I want to mention is that throughout the entire build process, I was using the tubs to test fit the space in between each of these levels, making sure we have enough space, enough gap so that the tubs can slide in and out easily. Now what I want to do is put on the final top, and I'll do that with 4 clamps at each corner and then secure everything with screws. All right, guys, we are at the final stretch. Now that we have the top on, we want to make sure that everything is level and straight. So we'll do that with a straight edge. Now you can see with the straight edge on, this is making contact. The other corner is making contact, but we got a bit of a gap right here. And what you'll notice that at each level, it'll be either a little bit of a dome or a little bit of a sag. Very rarely they'll be completely straight. And that's where these blocks come into play. Now I cut these blocks out of the scrap after I cut all these larger pieces, and I cut 8 of these blocks. Now the height of this is the same height as each of the spaces in between the levels. And then I also cut slightly thinner ones, 8 of these as well. Now these are going to go in the back. They're thinner because I need to allow space for the heat tape to run across. The thicker ones I put in the front. I mean, you don't have to make them as thick as this, but I use the thicker ones in the front. Sometimes I have cards where I keep the snake's information and I lean them up against these supports. So I just like them a little bit thicker. Plus I have the extra material. Now I cut 8 of these thick ones and I did number them. So this one is at the top. We have number 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all the way to the bottom. Same thing for the back. I numbered them so I know exactly which level they fit on, because I did test fit all of these previously to make sure that they all fit, and I don't want to jumble them up, even though they're all pretty much the same. Now, once you start adding them in, you're going to start at the bottom level and then work your way up. And then once you get to the top, and I'm just talking about test fitting, once you get to the top, you want to put the straight edge along the top again and make sure that gap is closed up like that. Now, if you get a dome, that means all your supports are a little bit too tall. And if you still get a sag, that means that you cut a little bit too short. So you just want to test fit them until you have them perfect, so that when you put these in, that gap goes away. And like if I let go of my hand right now, you'll see that it still falls down a little bit. And that's because this weight is putting it on this support, which is then putting weight on the bottom one. So once I have all of the supports in all of the levels, that's going to add up to the same height as the rack on the 2 sides. And then that'll close up this gap up here. The placement of the block is going to go dead center on each shelf. We know the interior shelves to be 31 inches wide. So dead center would be 15.5 right there on that line. Now, if I put a mark there on my shelf, you see that little mark right there? When I install the block, I won't know if that block is covering that mark, just covering the mark, or if it's covered it too much, because that mark's going to get covered by the block. And each of these blocks are 1/2 inch thick. So instead of putting the mark dead center, I'm going to put it just shy of 1/4 over on this side. You can do it on this side or this side. I choose this side. That way, when I install this block, I know to line the block up with that line. And then once I tilt it in, it's going to cover that line. When the whole project is completed, you won't see any marks. I did put an X to let me know that the block is going to be on this side of the mark, so that I don't accidentally install it on this side of the mark. So that's a little trick that I wanted to show you. And when everything is finished, it'll all look white with no marks. To secure those supports into place, I'm using PVC cement and a little bit goes a long way. You're just gonna put a little dab on the top, a little dab on the bottom, and then you line up with the mark and put it in, let it cure. Only takes a few minutes. And just as I said, once those supports are in, the gap is gone and you have a perfectly straight top on the front and the back. After installing the center supports, I went ahead and did some additional work off camera. That work was related to installing the heating components. I purposely left that out of this video because there's just different ways of installing heating components. There's different kits available, all depending on your comfort level with working with electricity. So if you want to see how I did it, I'll put a card up in the corner so you can go and click that and check it out. But I'll quickly just go over what I did just to get you up to speed so that we can move on to the next step in building out this rack. What we're looking at is the back of the rack. And as you can see, all of the heat tape are in place now. Those are simply adhered to the rack with aluminum foil. This is different than duct tape. This is aluminum foil that you can find in your local hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's. It comes in a roll. Simply cut them to size, peel off the back, and then you can stick it on like any other tape. Over here we have an extension cord that I've cut to length. Now, if you're going to be doing something plug and play, you might want to leave the plug on, but I'm going to wire everything myself, so I don't need the plug. Underneath here are two soldering points that connects the wire to the heat tape, and then those soldering points are covered with electrical tape. That's this black tape that you see right there. Then over top of that is the aluminum foil. On the other end, even though there's no soldering points, because I cut the heat tape, there's still a little bit of exposed metal. So those were covered with electrical tape as well before taping everything down with the aluminum foil. Now that every level is done, and you can see I use a little bit of painter's tape just to keep the extension cord out of my way, because I'm going to be putting on a layer of corrugated plastic to cover up the back, and I'll show you what that looks like. This is corrugated plastic. You can see the structure is very similar to cardboard. This is an offcut of this back panel that I already have taped to the back of the rack. And we're going to simply attach those with these screws. You can see that they have a very wide head so that they can hold on to the corrugated plastic without piercing through it as you drive the screw in. And I'll give you a look at the label. So this is what I'm using. And you can see that that's pretty much what they do. They hold on because of their wide head. They're able to hold on to the material without piercing through it. Now, to align the back panel so that you have some guidelines as to where to drill those screws, because it's really hard to see, what I do was I first tape the panel a little bit off to the inside, and then I put a mark wherever there is material, wherever there's a level to material to drill into. So I put a mark at each of these levels. At the interior levels, I put a mark, and they are lined up, even though at this angle it looks like they're low, but they are lined up with the material itself. I'll do that on this side. I've also done that over here on this side as well, so you can see those marks as well. So basically, you just have to mark it, shift the panel over, tape it, mark it again, and then you can take a straight edge and line up the two marks, draw a thin line, and that line serves as a guide to where you can screw into the material. So that's it. I just need to finish off the heating element. I'm going to call this DIY video complete. I think this rack is gonna work out just fine, but if there's any issues, I'll make sure to post an update. That about wraps it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you're new to this channel and you want to be informed of future uploads, make sure you're subscribed and ring that notification bell. As always, thanks for watching. Please share, and I'll see you guys next time.